Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Michelle Jones, Corporate Officer for qathet Regional District. I will call this January 29th, 2025 Committee of the Whole to order, and I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering in the traditional territory of the Kahlon Nation. As this is our first Committee of the Whole in January, the first order of business will be election of the chair. So I'll call upon the members for nominations for the position of chair. Director Brander.
I'd like to nominate Director McCormick.
Director McCormick, you've been nominated by Director Brander. Do you accept this nomination?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I'll call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. Thank you. I'll call a third and final time for nominations for the position of chair. As no other nominations have been received, Director McCormick is awarded position of chair by acclamation, and I will hand over during this meeting.
Thank you. Just give me a minute. All my suitcases and whatever.
I got it all. Holy cross.
Thank you very much to committee members. Directors, you have the agenda in front of you as their mover for the agenda. Any changes or additions? Yes, Director Goodwin.
Yes, I would like to move item 7.1 until after 8.4.
7.1 until after 8.4.
Yes.
All right. Everyone okay with that?
And then I had another one of them.
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll just make a note. Okay.
And then when we get to 8.4, could we do points 5 and 6, and then 3 and 4, and then 1 and 2, which would be social planning, then sub-regional recreation, then fire department.
Does anyone have any objection to doing that?
Great, miss that.
Sorry.
It's gonna be a lot harder for us to follow along.
5.6,
Yeah.
and then 3 and 4, and then 1 and 2.
3 and 4 would remain the same, and then 1 and 2 would become 5 and 6,
Yes.
and then 7 would remain 6.
Yeah, 7 would remain 7. So we'd do social planning first, then sub-regional recreation, then fire department. All my notes are organized like that. My apologies.
All right. Does anyone have any?
And then you also need to throw the 7.1 in as an 8.
Yes, it is. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, so 7.1 is now 8.
Yes.
Okay, we good with that? All right, no objections. So I'm not seeing anyone say no, they don't like that. So the agenda as amended, is there a, I'm going to ask for a mover again, just because we're not noticing an amended agenda. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. Adoption of the minutes of December the 18th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing no hands, motion to approve those minutes. Gisborne, seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. There are no delegations in inquiry, no unfinished business, and we have 8 items of correspondence. 6.5 is now the new 8.4. Is there any business arising from these items of correspondence? Yes, I see Director Fall. And
I'd like to pull item 6.2 for some discussion, if I may.
Okay, so 6.2 will become 7.1. Director Lennox, would you have them?
Thanks. I'm gonna ask to pull a few here because some of them are related to each other, and I think we can get to the point. 6.1, please. That'll be quick. And
6.1 becomes 7.2.
6.4.
6.4 becomes 7.3.
6.6 and 6.7. They're all good.
6.6 and 6.7 is 7.4. Is that right? Together?
I'll ask staff to keep track. So, I know.
Okay, so I think I've got that right. So is there any other business arising? Being nothing else.
I want to
Really?
yank 6.8 as well.
Pardon?
I want to yank 6.8 as well.
6.8,
Just
yes.
for clarification,
Okay.
will you be moving items of business like a motion, or are you just wanting to discuss?
I want a motion.
Okay, yep.
Okay, so 6.8 is now 7.5. Got that right. All right,
7.6, I think.
7. Okay, whatever. All right, so we're now on to 7.1, which is item 6.2 on the correspondence. And Director Fall, I believe you asked for this.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if there's a motion. I'd probably not. It's more of a question through the chair. This question came up at the town halls I held, which became, when we were looking at the budget, the short, I was pointing out surpluses, and some members of the fire department said we're not getting these benefits, and then that caused a lot of discussion among the attendees, and Mrs. Rogers was one of the attendees, so she's basically asking why not all LIVFD members are receiving the health and dental benefits that's budgeted in the LIVFD budget, and that's, I think I know the answer, and the fire chief gave a bit of an answer, but I think it's important for through the chair if our manager of emergency services can answer that, and as a kind of follow up, how it would be best to get this information to the public. I can write about it in my monthly article, but another option would be some other information that at least, or maybe it exists, of where the public could learn more about how these benefits are allocated.
So what, I see Mr. Tom's here, perhaps we can call on him. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd be happy to answer that question. And the answer lies in the regional district's policy 4.11 for insurance coverage for our volunteer fire department members. And the section in there that particularly speaks to the extended health and dental benefits that the regional district offers for its volunteer firefighters grew out of a study with consultants and our firefighters on how to meet the fire commissioner's training standards. And the recommendations were around achieving training standards and in reward was to reward the volunteer firefighters with the benefits. And really the way we were calculating that was attendance at weekly fire practices. And the LIVFD, unlike our other fire halls, did not until very recently have a practice of weekly fire practices. And so we really weren't offering as a fire service the opportunity for our members with weekly fire practices, which is the tradition in virtually all other fire halls. Now, the good news is, and I'm going to guess at what the fire chief told Director Fall is probably something similar, that by middle of last year, we've really now gotten into a good system of offering weekly fire practices at the Lasqueti Fire Hall. We have a number of members, and so we're reasonably optimistic that coming into this year that we've got enough success now to start accepting applications for members who are meeting the 60% at those practices. So really, we just had to evolve to the place where we were offering enough training for our members to attend.
Okay, thank you very much, and that addresses the question. I think from here I can explain this to at least to the public when they ask, because it's not just Mrs. Rogers. But I think that makes sense, and I'll review that policy. And it's good to hear, because one thing I noticed was that some of the money was being spent, but not all of it. So, and some of the questions that came up were, well, we don't even have weekly practices, or we haven't had, and so on. So I think this addresses that. Thank you, Mr. Toms. I think that addresses what I need from this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fall. Director Elliott.
So typically it might be considered better if we're explaining.
Someone's phone's doing something.
Go ahead.
It might be better for the regional district if we have staff explaining in a response letter the policy and the whys of things. And if you see it to others that might take that and use that as their newsletter piece or what have you, just because I think it's not a great idea for directors to interpret and explain our policies that I think staff. So I'm wondering if a motion to respond to the letter would be a good idea.
I think it would. Director Fall, do you have any objection
Uh,
to that?
No, if you want to make the motion, I'd be happy to second it, or I can make that.
Go ahead.
I guess my motion would be, I move that our manager of emergency services responds to the letter.
And
Second that.
Director Fall, you're seconding it. Okay, discussion on the motion. I'm not seeing any hands, so we will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. So thank you. We can now move on to 7.2, which is the old 6.1. Who asked for this?
Yes.
Director Lennox. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief with this one. I just, a couple of points. A possible motion, it's probably more of just a request for staff, and you can see this is addressed to multiple levels of government in our area. And really, I want to applaud a local solicitor trying to support youth to express their artistic flavor in a creative and constructive way. And there's a request here really for all of us, both the city and in the region. We do have some wall spaces and structures around. And I just ask our staff to really actually consider if there'd be an appropriate wall or structure that we could let the youth express themselves. We already do that in some of our businesses in the community that I work for have already allowed that on their premises. And so it just reminded me that we should all consider that in our area, because if we can focus their energy. So it's more just a request for staff and your brain power. Thanks.
Thank you. So are you making a motion then that staff be directed to identify possible sites?
Does it require a motion, corporate officer?
Thank you. If you're hoping to provide direction to staff.
I guess it
then
does.
It would require,
Okay, I don't think, thanks. I will make that motion to consider appropriate facilities that we have that would meet the intent of this and consider the ramifications.
I think
And-
that's
and
to
sorry.
consider if we have identifiable sites.
were you hoping that to be a report back to the,
I think that's appropriate, and then we can decide. Yes,
I'll
So
second.
getting a report back then on
that
possible.
would be nice. Thanks. That'll allow our staff to
Stephanie?
consider it.
Okay, Director Gisborne has seconded. Director Elliott, do you have your hand up?
Yes, just to comment on the motion.
Yep.
So I'm in favor of the motion, and I think it's good to support these things. It's not a new concept in our community. We've had free walls, and down at Willingdon Beach, the big concrete wall is essentially used in that way. We have people who, when they were young, did these same things and are now really good at promoting and managing and helping people do things in a good way rather than a difficult way. The Wishing Well is an art kind of a coalition that helps facilitate things like that as well. Catnip, I think, is mainly in charge of that, and his roots are very similar to what she describes in her letter as youth today. So we have experienced people that do this kind of thing already, and I think that I think we want to end up with some sort of letter of response that comes back out of an exploration of possible sites, but it might also be good to point out that there is an art community that handles a lot of this already.
Thank you, Director Elliott. And all we would be doing is identifying locations, not having anything to do with the art necessarily.
No.
Director Gisborne?
Oh, thank you. Brings me up a couple of ideas. One, when I lived on Denman Island, there was like a community fence, like on that hill that goes up, and it was open for anyone to paint on, like really at any time. I remember when I was living there, a bunch of the teenagers said, "Hey, we're gonna go and paint like the Zunga and all the kind of stuff on the fence." And it was like, well, who owns it. It was a social contract. So that I think is one option where, you know, you find a location and people can just update it whenever they want. I think another option is like we assess sites and then it has to go through like the approval of, you know, our staff and the management to kind of identify. So I think there's a couple of different options there. And one site that does come to mind is every time I drive past the Regional District Works Yard in Area B, there's like that big kind of concrete block wall. Which, you know, I like concrete block walls. I think they look nice, but that could be a site that could just maybe be spruced up or something, or, you know, be turned over to the kids as long as they don't, you know, destroy anything. It's just paint. That's my 2 cents. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Director Gizmo. Director Sethcott.
Thank you, Chair. Stacey also sent a letter to the city and it kind of fell between the cracks. When I saw this letter, I inquired, I looked through our agendas and saw that it did not come to council and contacted her. So she actually, I'm kind of surprised not to see her here because she asked if she could attend the meeting. I said, absolutely. I would have let the chair know if she was here. I just wanted to mention that it's coming back. So there may be some, I don't know, the city may have some suggestions as well. I don't know whether that's relevant to staff or not, but I wanted to mention that. I really do appreciate her initiative. Young people, something constructive to do. Great way forward in life. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Sethcott. So I'll put myself on the speaker's list and say that I think it's a great idea to celebrate the artistic ability that we have in the community. And it's good for the artists so that they can paint on a piece of wall that will remain. When you paint it, you know, inappropriately on someone else's private property where they don't want that art, it's going to be removed one way or the other. So this way, this is art that can remain and can be part of the community and celebrated by everyone. So I agree, it's a good idea. So we have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, so that brings us to 7.3, which is the former item 6.4 regarding the grant stipulation letter. And who
Thank you, Chair.
put this on? Director Lennox.
So just really this, and it's unfortunate that the CAO isn't here because he's really our staff that's been working hard on this and some of the answers, but I don't want to there's some time sensitivity here. And so I'll go through some points here, and I've been, you know, I'm a user and I've been in contact with the receiver, so I'm just trying to interpret some of the communications and for folks watching. Really in this particular correspondence, it's about the grant that was received, which is nice to receive a grant for administration, but it really actually clarified the stipulations around the grant. So for directors to understand what the money is allowed to be used for and not for. And on a positive note, I was pleased to see that assisting with costs associated with negotiating development service arrangement for water with the Tuolumne Nation. Because really that is, I've been saying that a key part of this has been kind of under realized. And lately there's been some meetings on that. So there's been some positive developments between the receiver, municipal affairs, our CAO and Tuolumne at a staff level. And really, you know, we're in 6.6, I'll discuss potential motion there. So as I said, really, this probably isn't enough money to satisfy the needs of the work that has to happen. But in the second page, I just want to point out there are some timelines. So I guess what I'm saying, I'd like to keep this maybe on for the next meeting when the CAO is here and we can we have some timelines to discuss. So I've just asked the corporate officer to maybe bring this back. I don't know if I have to make a motion to do so, but
Thank you. I believe that the CAO to this project, so I don't know that,
we'll have an opportunity then.
yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm satisfied with that, but I wanted to bring your attention to some timelines here that are appropriate, you know, very crucial for the entire project. So thank you.
Thanks, Director Lennox. Is there anything further on this item before we?
A question.
Director Gizmo?
Thanks for having this item pulled. All right. Later on in our agenda, we're going to be talking about like service reviews and the creation of like these kind of committee meeting structures. with the Lund water system, we're looking at potential service conversion from improvement district to regional district service. If the board was to, create such an advisory committee or something like that to take a look into it, would this grant could it also be eligible to, support the work of such a committee? Because when I see, fertility negotiations and working with, Tla'amin Nation and, really kind of digging into like how this is going to be funded, that might be something that, the elected leaders might need to take some initiation on. So I'm just wondering, can this grant also be eligible for that kind of work? Or is that something we'll have to wait to find out the answer to?
I think
CAO.
I was just trying to see. I do think it might be something that we're going to have to wait for the CAO.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the mass, that's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's nothing else on 7.3, we can move on to 7.4, which is the former 6.6. And Director
Me
Elliott.
again.
Oh, is that you again?
I think so.
Okay. Horace Lund, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair. And again, I just want, it's all tied in together. So I want the directors to be very aware and sort of on the ball here as far as this is the response from municipal affairs and the public watching as well and users of where the municipal affairs is at, and the phased, the following responses are required of us in some cases and the receiver. So I won't belabor the points. The key points in here is, as we've learned recently, there's the Lund system itself and its safe water provision, and then the dams have come up, right? So the dam safety reports that we've received. And there's been a lot of mitigation as well. So you'll see in the correspondence, our original report is not the same. So there's been some mitigation efforts. And there's also been a DRIF application, federal application that was turned down. So you'll see in there, it was actually turned down. But the fact of the matter is they encouraged the receiver and the qRD to reapply. So that's a key thing, and I hope you support any efforts we have to really obtain funding. So I just wanted to identify there's another stab at DRIF funding and some other opportunities. So again, to be clear, and just to finalize, there's an upcoming meeting with all the parties, I believe, including the CAO on February 4th. So that we'll be receiving more information. And they've had a recent, as I said, recent positive meeting with Tla'amin staff. Really the next step is, in my mind, the receiver has said that they sort of need an information package at the council level to their staff, through their staff, and then a possible delegation. So that's kind of where I'm at. I just wanted to be very open with all the correspondence and where I'm at as a director and a user. There's a lot going on, but we're seeing some progress. We're seeing involvement with the nation. And I just wanted to bring you up to speed. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Lennox. And you've got a meeting coming up. as you said.
Exactly.
So that will be good. Is there anything else on this item? Seeing no hands, we can move on to 7.5, which is the former 6.7.
Yeah, and I'll just be super quick. I already mentioned it. This is the DRIF application and the explanation that it was turned down, but we have another opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, so that's all included in that.
Yep, I'm
Okay,
done.
so we're now on to 7.6, which is the former 6.8, if I've got that correct. And that is the correspondence from Lift Community Services. Director Elliott.
Thank you. So what I want to do is make a motion. This isn't a motion, I'm trying to craft it first, that would have us responding or writing a letter to IRCC funding program to let them know why this decision is really going to impact our community. Not only are we remote, people can't travel to get the same services at another community. I want to object to the people who do the funding to this decision and how it impacts our community. And so I'm not here to say what everything should be in the letter, but I think I'd like us to, our board to, or our chair, or to recommend to the board, I guess, is the motion, to write a letter objecting to this. is what I'd like to do.
Okay, so let's kind of hold that thought. Let's open it up to other directors for comment, and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Ma'am.
So any other thoughts on this? I know for myself, I'll put myself on the list here. When I read that letter, it made me think about funding for immigration services. And is that meant to be one-time funding from senior government to help the immigrants get settled and sorted out and started out? Or is it meant to be ongoing? And certainly if it's meant to be one time, I don't agree with, but I would understand why they're doing what they're doing. But if it's meant to be ongoing funding, leaving people cut off in kind of midstream is, you know, really disrespectful and hurtful to those people. So I'm unclear as to which, you know, target that money is meant for. So having said that, I recognize Director Southcott, and then we will.
I was gonna try to answer your question.
Oh, all right. Oh, well, Director Southcott had his hand up first. So did you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I probably do. Immigrant Services has been an ongoing operationally funded service for many years here through LIFT and the Prep Society before that. Goes way back to before I came back to Powell River, I'm pretty sure. So it's thought that this is political in the general trend right up to national level. Obviously, this is federal funding. To just, you know, pulling back on encouraging immigration. So that's just what's thought. I have to really make that clear. But to roll it back to 15% means almost decimating what has been an extremely valuable service here. We have more immigrants in this town, many of whom have benefited in big ways over the years. I've watched this through being on the literacy committee and also, which has been close to it, and also with the library. I was on the library board. These are all kind of quasi social service sort of organizations that are connected in, who have also been linked. So not only has the service been provided itself, but it's been linked into other services here as well. So it's a very, LIFT has done an amazing job over the years in a very quiet way. So I would really support Director Elliott's motion. And I hope we can bring this to the city too, because I think this is the kind of thing that needs to be objected to locally.
Thank you. Good points, Director Southcott. So we have no motion on the table yet. We're talking. Director Gizman.
Yeah, I find this very concerning. Taking a look at their budget, they've got, you know, millions of dollars. Works out to roughly $90 per capita, like on a nationwide funding. So a community of ours of 20,000 people, it's like $1.8 billion if it was on a per capita amount. But one of the big concerns politically around immigration, and I know this is a federal issue and I'm not federal, is that when you have immigration issues, quite often it's because everyone's being kind of concentrated into an urban center where it's like, okay, these are all the folks from Italy, or these are all the folks, and that's where there starts to be a lot of friction because they're not being embraced with open arms by the broader community. But in small towns, you don't really get that as much. And that's where a community like Powell River has a good history of being so inviting and having those connections being built. So I'm really disappointed to see this funding being cut. So yeah, I would support some kind of motion to bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still on the first round. I recognize Director Lennox and then Director Fall.
Thanks, Chair. So you asked for our thoughts, and then I'll give you my perspective, and I understand what Ms. Markle is saying here. I think it is federal, but it's a tragedy that they be taking this away, especially from small communities that have even less sort of those main centers of help. And really, they're tracking the immigration and they're tracking the funding, therefore they can per capita realize how many people in general are in our region and fund the region. So really, I think it is appropriate to have a response about our dismay in that. But I will be honest, you know, there's statements made in the document about how LIFT feels, or at least the executive director, that, you know, I think, you know, and that's not what we're discussing, but really those are services, federal services that need to be provided here. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Lennox. Director Fall.
Yes, I express support for writing a letter too. I think this is ongoing. It's clear in the letter. It talks about things like citizenship ceremonies and so on, and you only get to citizenship after years of being in the country. So even though Canada has recently chosen to reduce immigration levels, that's, first of all, doesn't has nothing to do with immigrants who are already here, and they need ongoing support right through to that process. And secondly, even I'm not aware of what the exact level that it's been dropped by, but I do not believe it's dropped by 85%. It's nowhere near that. So, you know, if they want to, if there's a need from the feds, sorry.
All right, I'm just gonna ask you to speak a little bit slower. Is
Oh.
it not possible to hear everything that you're saying? So,
Your sound quality.
That's my sound quality. I'm trying to help. I'm going to buy a microphone, but all this to say, the these changing support by 85% reduction is not reasonable, and I think a letter to write to complain about that. If the federal government reduced it because of budgetary concerns or changes, you know, 10%, 20% or whatever, that seems not out of the question, but 85% seems punitive.
thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, has everyone who wants to speak on this first time spoken? So, Director Elliott.
So I think we should seek clarity too. I believe they've denied 100% of their funding, and the only reason it's an 85% reduction is because they get 15% of their funding from other sources. So it's a denial of all funding from that funding. And then their response is to have folks who require services access them out of the Comox court office. And so I wanted to make sure that we explain the realities of our region and the fact that Comox and Courtney are not a drive. People have to take a boat to get there.
Think so.
And so,
Excuse me.
anyway, we can clarify that. I think it's 85% of their total funding for that program comes from that funding envelope, and they've been denied completely. But that's neither here nor there. I'm prepared to make the motion now. And
Why don't you do that?
I think our corporate.
Okay, corporate officer is going to the word on our board.
Make sure the wording is even desired outcome.
Where you're,
I'm wondering if remote even does it, or whether it should be remote and accessible.
7.
also suggest adding the word negative, between the word the and impact. Regarding the negative.
And that we do have a high ratio of immigrants here that require services.
So is this the motion that you're putting on the table?
We're working on the wording, and then I'll.
Just say it.
We'll see.
Expect services. Okay. Service.
Our region, I think.
Just make sure.
The committee recommend the board to write a letter to Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, regarding the negative impact to our remote and inaccessible community by denying Live Community Services the funding for the immigration services they provide, given our high ratio of immigrants and refugees in our region.
What if we took out Lift Community Services? And had it by denying funding for the immigration services provided in our, so that it's not about the agency, but about the funding for our community. provided in our community or whatever. I don't know.
In our region.
regarding the-
Or just after services, you could just take all that out.
Yeah,
Integration services.
Regional district. That's probably don't even know what a regional district is.
I think I like that better because it isn't necessarily about an organ. Who the operator is, it's more about that we need. Because if they wanted to come back and say, well, we're gonna increase services through Service Canada or something, that would be different,
Yes.
but yeah, we're not married to any particular operator. We just need the services and are located here.
Right.
thank you to Ms. Jones for working with this. So this is what you're moving and seconded by
Second.
Good point. Discussion on the motion. I think we've pretty much said it. We've all expressed our opinion. So unless there's something new, we will just call for the question. All in favor? Any opposed? There. Right. I think that concludes business arising. So we are now on to reports 8.1 regarding the condition of savory roads. There is a recommendation here.
I will move the recommendation.
The recommendation and has been moved and seconded. Discussion, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Won't take too long. If you read the report, I want to thank our staff for writing it. The discussion analysis says the story. There's like literally decades of this back and forth between the ministry and the different board chairs and on. But I really appreciate staff hearing the community and really the impact, not just on the public, but it's our emergency responders. So that's the key to this one, and I hope you fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gizmo?
Fully supported, and I do recall that when we used to have our meetings with Ministry of Transportation, Savory Island was always an issue that got brought up. And I think this motion, I'm happy to support it, but there's also another item coming up later on the agenda 9.1, and I think that they're a little bit related, so looking forward to discussion on that one too.
Okay, so on the issue of 8.1 in this report, Director Southcott.
Oh, yeah, thank you. For 10 years, I tried to help Manager Tom's lobby and others here at the RD while I was serving as the ambulance chief. And we had some true horror stories over there, carrying injured people. That's all I want to say about it. I could add the lurid details, but it's unforgivable from my view that something can't be arranged locally. Anyway, there's my true feelings.
I hear you. I can't imagine first responders keep it stable in that situation. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet on this? Okay, Director Lennox?
Yeah, and I appreciate the actually real world experience on responding there as a responder. But it should note that even the community itself, the ASIC group over there is lobbying. The ministry has all the history, so this complements the efforts of the local community to get a local solution. MOTT can do it. They've done it in other areas. They just have to be basically forced to. And finally, our MLA Neil is aware of this as well and supports it. Yes.
Anything further on this? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We're on to 8.2, the extreme heat response plan, and there is a recommendation. Did anyone want to ask questions about this report prior to putting the recommendation on the table? So I'll recognize Director Gizmo.
Yeah,
Questions about the
just a
report?
question. So when we've had local government leadership academy or like these political conferences, I can't remember which one it was, but there was a presentation about heating centers and cooling centers and liability and all that other kind of stuff. When I went through the plan, it seems to be much more of like a high level plan. By adopting this plan, does this impose any significant liability or responsibility onto the regional district to be providing cooling centers when we do have a heat event? Is there going to be a follow-up, hey, we got to build a cooling center on Lund or Texada or something like that in response? So I guess that's my question is, where do we go from here if we adopt this?
We'll call on Mr. Toms. I'm sure he has an answer for us.
Yeah, through the chair. That's a really good question, and you're not the first to point that out. That was a significant discussion point throughout this study in all areas of the region. And so to answer your question quickly, I think we're comfortable with the recommendations here in terms of both the balance of need and the liability, because it does not actually obligate the local governments to get into areas that are not its jurisdictional authority. We really ensured that we looked at which level of government is responsible for what aspects of these. And certainly when we're dealing with vulnerable populations and emergency health matters, which were the principal concern here, we really, and we had the support of all three health authorities, principally VCH, but Island Health and First Nation Health Authority involved throughout this. It is possible for local governments to get involved in cooling centers, but we really went to great lengths to explain that we don't have staff with expertise and we wouldn't call on volunteers. And if you look at even some of the recommendations that came out really loud and clear, especially on the islands, on Texada Island and on Lasqueti, really a call to the health authorities to help out so that we're not putting those facilities that aren't even regional district owned facilities in a difficult position when there's community need without the medical backup. You know, the Legion may have a facility with air conditioning and backup power, but certainly not the volunteers who could handle people who might be suffering medical distress in that event. And so really it needs to be a collaboration, and that's the intent for this whole project, is to push that collaboration forward.
Okay, your question about liability. All right. I see no further hands for questions. So could we have a mover for this recommendation? That's Director Gisborne. Thank you. Okay. Now we're open to debate. I'm happy to put myself on the speakers list since I'm not seeing any hands jump out right away. All right. Am I seeing Director Fall?
Yes, you are.
Okay, you go first, then I'll go.
Okay, I have a comment and then actually an amendment. The item 11, so I was looking at the recommendations. It's a very good report. I think I support the work. I think it's really important. And I think all of the recommendations except for one, I really support. And I particularly wanted to highlight recommendation number 11 on asking or that Vancouver Island Health Authority should implement the community paramedicine service on Lasqueti Island, as has been done in other rural and remote communities. That's something that has become increasingly discussed on Lasqueti, and in some of my conversations with first responders. The first responders carry a heavy burden on Lasqueti because there is no paramedics, and so the first responders are doing the job of paramedics, moving people, getting them to the helicopter, getting them to the wharf. So I think that would be really good. And I've been pondering ways to initiate that. And I think this really can help start that, take that to another step, to try to reach out to Island Health and to try to push that forward, because I think there are other communities the size of Lasqueti that have community paramedics, and I think it would be really good. The second item, and the rest of the recommendations are all really good, with the exception of number 20. And I know, based on the previous comments by Mr. Toms and Director Gisborne, it probably doesn't really matter, but I think the Lasqueti residents would be kind of upset at me if I didn't pull this one out, because that's about considering adoption of a building permit process. And I know it doesn't affect Lasqueti, so I'm going to put forward an amendment, and if the rest of the board isn't, or the committee isn't interested, then vote it down, and that I'll send it to the corporate officer. So I move an amendment to add, after endorse the recommendations, to add the words with the exception of recommendation 20. So endorsing all the recommendations. I think if I get a seconder, I'll speak briefly to that. Okay, that really, that I think helps pave the way that these recommendations aren't just fluff, because if they're just words that we don't have to act on, we may or may not, then that actually gives the plan less meaning. But if we want to really act strongly on these as more giving direction, then that one might be a bit of a hurdle, because it might cause some unnecessary discussions in our communities about building permits that I think won't be very productive towards getting the need, the implementing these recommendations towards dealing with extreme heat.
Okay, so your amendment then is to eliminate recommendation number 11 from the list.
So it's, no, number 20, no. So it's number 20 related to
Number
building
20,
permit. So it's basically the recommendation on the motion on the table says the committee recommend to the board that the board receive and endorse the recommendations, comma, with the exception of recommendation 20 as they apply in relation to the regional emergency preparedness service, blah, blah, blah. So that's the basically pulling that one out as not getting this endorsement, because I think that helps us be stronger supporting the other recommendations.
thank you. And I can't disagree with that. Director Lennox, do you have your hand
Yeah,
up on the
thank you.
amendment?
Yes, to the amendment, I actually just want to thank Director Full for catching that one. I had seen it last night reading the report, but hadn't taken the notes. So that's important for folks in my area too, and doesn't restrict us in the way, you know, or be at odds with the intent of the folks in my area. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Director Gitlin?
I fully support the amendment because it's about pulling recommendation number 20, which is that the qathet regional district should consider development and adoption of a building permit process. When I read that last night, my thought was, okay, you know, we could consider it at the planning committee. I have a suspicion of how that consideration might work out based on, you know, how the Let's Talk land use things worked out. But this, I think, is a good amendment because then it would essentially not have our staff coming forward with a report on, you know, bringing in building permits in our community where we have areas that, you know, don't have zoning and we don't have a lot of these other rules and restrictions. And I get the intent of it because the BC Building Code has been updated to ensure that a portion of the structure has like temperature control so that, you know, people can actually be safe in these heat events. But of course, the BC Building Code covers a whole bunch of other things. And as my father always said, the province writes the rules, so they should pay to enforce it. So that's my stance.
Thank you. Further on the amendment, Elliot, I think you were next.
Just wanted to, where in this report am I looking to see this recommendations?
14 of 70.
I can share
That's
it.
on page 12 to,
We all have a different number.
We can share.
Thank you.
Uh,
14 of 72.
Page 9 of this report, page 14 of starting from the staff report,
There you go.
page 78. Does that answer your question, Director Lane?
Okay, I got it now, yeah.
Director Southside?
Thank you.
Thank you. I support regulation in many situations, but the building code isn't going to go away if we let go of this particular recommendation or suggestion number 20. So, yeah. Any reputable builder or any person building reputably should know the building code, and it's the building code is written for a reason. Really consider heating and cooling more than ever before. It's been amended recently with that specifically in mind. So I do support it. Maybe my first reaction would have been not to support it because I don't really trust the general public to do things that I think they should do. People get in trouble, you know, with my past vocation, we depended on human stupidity quite a bit to job security. But that, you know, you have to trust. I trust people. If they're going to build, they're going to read the building code, and they're going to builders know the building code. So I do support eliminating this from the recommendations for the regional district. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Southcott. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, you've already spoken.
I had a question and now I have something to say.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so a question to get clarification so that we can understand what we were talking about. So I think at one point in time in the future, it's possible that the provincial government might dictate that we have to have this. But it is expensive to take it on. So I don't see us voluntarily jumping in there and being the enforcer of the BC building code if we don't have to be. And so, yes, the BC building code's there, and in areas where the local government doesn't have these services, it's up to, you know, the provincial government to figure out what they want to do about their BC building code. And there is a sort of a backup system in that if it hasn't gone through inspection and so forth, the home has a harder time getting insurance and all kinds of other things, which puts, you know, the onus back on whoever's building to be certified and so forth before they can get their buildings insured and sold and those other things. And that seems to be a cheaper way to go. It puts, you know, the onus on insurance companies and folks to pay attention to that where there is no inspections going on.
Thank you, Judge Shirley. I'm putting myself on the list. Thank you for bringing up this exception. I totally agree with you. Our official community plans speak quite clearly for each area and what the community vision is for that area. I know for Area G, it's been very loud and clear that there are no building regulations or rules that would be, you know, welcomed by the community. And I believe areas on the mainland, Area B in particular, is kind of going that route. So I think that that's a good recommendation to delete that. So that having been said, is there any final discussion on the amendment? Seeing no hands, all in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. Okay, so we're back to debate on the main motion. And I think I was next on the speakers list. And I just want to say that I really appreciate getting this report. And I said this at the Regional Emergency Executive Committee, which also considered and reviewed this report. I like the way it's set out. Responsibilities are laid out very clearly. Clearly, it is the health authorities who are going to be the lead on all of these situations. But what we can do is be prepared to support that lead with facilities that can accommodate the needs. But it's not just about today, it's also about tomorrow and planning as we retrofit existing buildings to add air conditioning to those buildings, window awnings or some sort to provide shade, planting street trees. These are all things, you know, that can be done in the future. And I think we've done a great job with the hydro regreening program, and Mr. Deborah constantly applying for grants and getting those. So adding those trees, I think, is a really critical thing for us to be doing, and it should be continued. So I was very impressed with the plan and feel that since our main role is communication, I think that is a very appropriate role for us to take on. And yeah, I hope we never need to use this plan. It's like firefighters. I hope you never need to call them, but you sure want to know that they're there. So those are my thoughts on this recommendation. So Director Lennox?
We're on the main now, not the amendment.
We're on the
right?
main.
Just to keep my
Yes.
mind, thank you. Just quickly, if you read through almost every recommendation is should. It doesn't say must, it says should. So really, you know, beginning to parse through and considering this bylaw or that bylaw, I don't think we need to do that because it says should, not must, and so that allows us discretion. I think page 17 of 72, point 4 called the plan approach. It's got several points there. Those are the key aspects of how this emergency response plan is proposed to be used, and it spells it out and the limitations that we have. So my one question to staff, and I just haven't found it, how often does this emergency response plan need to be reviewed and revised? Good question. Like how often are we going to look at it? So,
Through the chair, you know, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if we've got a legislative context in that at all at this point, to be perfectly honest, unless I'm missing something. You know, we put this in the mix with our other current plans. Most of them we're trying to review on a 10-year cycle, barring any other changes.
Yeah, just thank you for that. And as I said in point 4, it literally says we meet the requirements of the response plan under Emergency and Disaster Management Act. Just for my clarification, is just because I'm a safety guy, is this isn't an emergency response plan that's required under WorkSafe or prevent, it's more under that, get a plan and then, work towards it. Is that maybe a good summary?
If I could, through the chair, we know through the still relatively new Emergency Disaster Management Act that local authorities are responsible at a minimum for trying to understand the risks and making plans within their areas of responsibility. We still don't quite have regulations from the province that might specify a little more, but certainly this, to our knowledge, would appease that. And but certainly doesn't try to take over from, say, the provincial responsibilities. And I think that's the real emphasis for us. This doesn't mean that the regional district is responsible for all of the vulnerable health issues in a heat emergency.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is another point that's a little similar to 20. I don't think it actually needs to be pulled unless someone convinces me otherwise. It's actually point number 14. Qathet Regional District, Tla'amin Nation, and the City of Ottawa should each consider adoption of a street tree bylaw and or inclusion of shade trees on private lands utilizing development permit area processes or other tools available to local governments. Similar to what I said to the amendment, the point is, should each consider. I think, sure, the planning committee can consider having additional development permits and then additional enforceable bylaws relating to street trees. But I don't think the planning committee is really going to go for it. We could pull it if we want to, but I don't think it's really necessary. And it makes sense in the city where the municipality has control over their streets. Out in our areas, we don't. We might put trees up and the Ministry of Transportation comes down and just knocks them all down. And then BC Hydro comes and cuts that 3-meter swath for their trees, and then we go for their power lines, and we go oh, okay, that was good spending money. Sorry.
Okay, so we hear you on item number 14, but again, it's a should consider. It's
Yeah, if someone wants to pull it, second it, but I don't think it's necessarily effort.
remember it's a consultant too that's giving us their professional advice. So
Yeah.
that is their advice. Okay, anything further? Seeing nothing, seeing no Director Fall.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. I just have a question, and actually some of the comments about the wording made me start to think about how this proceeds. So this is a question through the chair to Mr. Toms. There's a lot of recommendations. They don't all apply to the regional district. Some of them seem to be operational in nature. They can maybe be done without board involvement. Some of them seem to be relating to board decisions. How do these recommendations unfold? So if we've endorsed in general the recommendations, how do they get prioritized and how do they come forward in the sense that should the board expect further reports coming out on this to move some of these along, or will some of them happen, and the ones that are happening without the need for board support, will there be information that we can monitor so that members of the public that want to know, or at least we know what's happening with this?
Good question, Mr. Toms.
Yeah, through the chair, and I think Director Fall, you did respectfully, I think, largely answer that question while asking it. I think there are, as you see, operational recommendations, and as you see, all of them, and many of you said these are all couched in a should or can consider, but there will be some that may require board endorsement in order to go forward, and certainly those would have to come forward. So typically in a project, in a study like this, whether it's community wildfire plans or the 2012 fire services review, we'll get a buffet of recommendations for consideration, and it will take years to elaborate, and some along the way will get dropped because things will change. Some will be strictly at the staff operational level, and others. And overall, many of these are also just for the educational understanding of it all, and to be also the leaders among the community, because a lot of these can apply to non-local government, whether they're facilities or people choosing shade trees on their properties or whatever it may be. So there's also just that aspect of being the educational side of it.
Thank you.
Seeing no hands, we will vote on the main motion as amended. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. That brings us to 8.3, regarding recommendations from the Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee. There's a recommendation before us. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Thank you. Seconded by Drew Brander.
Sure. This is something I've heard quite a bit about from members of the community as well, around the accessibility of, folks with small amounts of garbage. They used to be able to go to the mall, drop it off at that location. This has come before our accessibility committee, but I'm wondering, we have a solid waste management plan monitoring advisory committee. I think I got that correct. And I think at some point it's supposed to meet. Would this be an item that could potentially be sent over to our solid waste management plan monitoring advisory committee?
That would seem to make sense. We have staff comment. Mr. Kahlon.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, that would be appropriate.
Would we need a motion for that to just say, and that it be forwarded to the solid waste management plan monitoring advisory committee?
Would it be going to that committee in any case, or would a motion be helpful?
This information has been shared with the members of the Joint Accessibility Committee, but it has not been specifically forwarded to the Solid Waste Committee for attention. So if the board so chooses, that I believe a motion would be required.
So the committee we're talking about doesn't seem to have a meeting schedule. Or any meeting,
You're talking about the advisory.
the solid
Solid
waste
waste.
management advisory committee. So my concern is that there's been a lot of changes in solid waste recently, and a lot of information that could use an advisory committee discussion. And yet we seem to, so I'm not sure how an advisory committee meeting gets called, or where the schedule is, or how those on the committee, I'm at one of, can figure out when to forward agenda items or anything that we think should be on the agenda, and when we would have a meeting. So do we know anything about how that happens?
Let's see if we can get some clarification. Mr. Kahlon, do you have that answer?
Thank you through the chair. We have had a lot of vacancies in that committee membership. So yes, it has been difficult organizing the committee meeting. There are no solid plans right now other than to get back on track with the membership and go from there. That's all the information I have right now.
Committee could do to support or help get that back on track? Anything you could use from us?
Mr. Kahlon?
Thank you through the chair. I don't have an immediate request at the top of my mind right now. That was not an anticipated one to prepare for this report. I apologize.
Okay. Well, we could put the function of that committee on a future agenda, and then people could come with more information maybe.
Corporate officer had response.
Thank you through the chair. I do know that staff is looking at the terms of reference and the specifics of the, it's quite specific in the membership. So staff is planning on actually bringing something forward if we didn't get enough membership in the future.
Will a motion to put it on a future agenda be helpful?
It's already in the works, I believe. Yeah, so if that's needed, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. So just, I have a quick follow-up question. So if Director Gisborne thought that this be forwarded to to that committee, but that committee is not functioning at the moment, then I would take your recommendation to be kind of held until that committee is functioning. So, and that is in the works.
I thank you. I think that a motion to refer is fine. Because it will just go in the hopper. Once that meeting, that committee does meet, it would be an agenda item on their agenda to consider. But the intent is for that committee to form.
Thank you. So we're back to the motion on the table. And is there further discussion on this motion? Anyone who hasn't spoken first time, seeing no hands. Director Gisborne.
I guess the question would be for our corporate officer, would it be better to put forward an amendment to include at the end and that the recommendation, or that it be forwarded to the Solid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee? Or would a separate motion of just to refer the entire item to the Solid Waste Management Committee be more appropriate?
Wording wise, it might be better just to do it in two separate motions.
I would, after we pass this motion, then I'll
I will call.
try and create a motion to send it over.
Is there further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing no hands. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. Director Gisborne.
I'm not sure if our corporate officer has better wording for how we want to get there, or do you want me to butcher it?
I would just recommend that item be referred to the solid waste
I'll move that.
advisory committee. As
And Director Lennox has seconded. Okay, so this is to refer this item to the, any discussion? Seeing no hands. All in favor? Okay. To 8.4, the fund of statutory Brandon.
Thanks, Chair. Prior to getting into the actual motions, if I could just address the board and make a few comments. I've done a lot of thinking and research into the next 6 motions that we have in front of us. I think if we sit down and look at every one of them, it can kind of confusing, but I think I have a pretty straightforward way of going forward. If I could just propose that to the board. First off, I would like to propose Director Fall as a facilitator for all 3 reviews. He's got skills and background experience and all this kind of thing. And to be quite honest, I'm not really excited about the concept of having a big budget for a facilitator, but I believe Director Fall is amenable to helping us out with this. So that's the first part. Moving to the actual preliminary meetings, we need to have the representatives of the services that are part of that are members of the service, but we also need to have somebody representing the board. So for the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department service and the social planning, I was going to propose that Director Southcott be the board representative, those 2 situations, and on the rec center contribution service that Director McClellan would be the representative, because these are individuals who are not members of these services, so they'd be able to represent the interests of the board as a whole instead of just a specific one. And then the other item that comes up is when to meet, and I spent a lot of time going through the schedules for the council members, for our schedules. And I threw in stuff like the EA Directors Forum and holidays and all sorts of stuff. And it's amazing how quickly dates get X'd off of the calendar. But the one that jumped out to me was February 12th. It's a Wednesday. And the concept that I had was to have 3 separate meetings on that Wednesday for the 3 different services, so that only the people who were really needed to be there would be there. Which would be, my thoughts were rec center could meet at 9 AM, and I imagine this could be virtual, because it would have to be if Director Fall is gonna be part of it. At 11 AM, social planning can meet, and at 1 PM, VFD can meet. Thoughts being that if we do it in that order, Directors McCormick and Lennox would be there for the first 2 meetings, but they wouldn't have to be there for the third. And Director Southcott would be there just for the second and third meetings and not have to be there for the first. Directors Fall, Gisborne, and myself would have to be there for all 3. So, that's where I'm at. Oh, the other advantage of the 12th is if for some reason, I don't anticipate these meetings being very long, but if for some reason it is, the 13th is also an open date on everybody's, at least council and board calendars. I can't say about personal calendars. But if that all seems relatively reasonable, I think corporate officer has that information, you can put it on the screen. In case you have any questions about it. But that seems to be amenable, if everybody's amenable to that, if that seems reasonable, I'd be happy to make the appropriate motions to make that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, while it's being voted, sure. Yes. Question, go ahead.
So your first point was to appoint a facilitator. Was that one of the motions that were listed here, or is
So I
that?
have another motion for that.
And then my question was, I'm unfamiliar with the process, obviously. Would we normally hire a facilitator?
It's a possibility, but it doesn't need to happen. Have somebody from the group be the facilitator. And I kind of thought that Andrew has the background and experience in this, and he is actually only a member of one of the 3 services that is under review. So it seemed like a pretty logical choice.
Okay, so and you've obviously talked to Director Fall ahead of time.
Yes, I did. I
And
did
he
want
has-
to propose it before knowing that he would be willing.
It seems like it might have travel and time and a whole bunch of things affiliated with
Well,
it.
there will be no travel. I think we can just do it all virtually.
Okay.
And I did propose that there could be a budget assigned to the facilitator, but he chose not to go down that path.
Thank
Rather
you.
provide the service for free. With the understanding that if things get deeper, then he'll back off, and then we potentially would have to establish a budget for a facilitator. But at least for the preliminary meetings, which is what we're talking about today, he's happy to sit in and just kind of keep things going.
Like a chair of some type.
Essentially, yeah.
So there's no motion on the table. We're still in the discussion phase. So Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot there. I think I understand your intent. Can you clarify what you would need from me
Because
on the dates, right?
you are a member of the rec center and the social planning. So you would be at the 9 o'clock meeting and the 11 o'clock meeting.
I also have a CIMAC meeting at 10 a.m. And
It's possible that we done it. I mean, I don't know how long these meetings are gonna take, but
I'm traveling for work, so it's, you know,
I know.
it's no, she's out of the country. You know, I'll make it work and I'll attend as much as I can, but
it's tough to find a date. It was shocking how many got
Right.
took off the calendar. How
as, you know, just as we've discussed before, I respect everybody's movement towards the afternoon. This is why, right? Because we have other things that quickly, you know, other jobs and other commitments. So I'll do my best to attend.
Thank you, appreciate that.
No motion on the table as yet.
Right.
Director Duflo.
Thank you. This has kind of blindsided me because I didn't realize that this is what was being proposed. I actually had something very different being proposed. I guess this is one of the challenges that is hopefully going to be addressed through the service reviews as communication around the table. There are 3 separate service reviews that have been put forward in my submission to the minister. They were not to be treated all the same way. The MVFD service review, I have requested a facilitator, especially a third-party facilitator because of the sensitive nature of it. So having a member of our board being the facilitator for the MVFD, I think might actually do more harm than good. The social planning service, I don't even think we actually need a facilitator for that service unless we really wanted to expand the scope. My initial thoughts on the social planning service is we could make that a very cheap and efficient discussion because the service itself hardly does anything. We could essentially just terminate the service and be done with it. The sub-regional recreation complex funding, that one, if we do want to expand the discussion beyond the 3 participants and include the municipality and include the Tla'amin Nation, which is really the legwork that was done to create that service, then yeah, we might want to have a facilitator as well. I actually had some different ideas on the board appointment, with one exception. I actually had also thought of Director McCormick as being the board representative for the sub-regional recreation service agreement, because I know it's challenging when you've got areas A, B, and C as participants, but also the municipality is in another challenging position where they are the ones receiving it. That really only leaves Director McCormick and Director Fall as the board members that don't really have a vested interest in either camp. So when we would get to the sub-regional recreation contribution service, I'd be happy to put Director McCormick's name forward. As for the times, 9 a.m. is a challenge. I think that's something that came up when we had our discussions around our meeting schedules. So I don't, like we've already heard from Director Lennox, that may not be as amenable to all of us. When we get to the, let's see, the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department service, is myself and Director Brander are the participants. And I was thinking that the board appointed representatives could actually be Director Lennox because he's relatively close. And no slight to Director Fall, it's just a distance. And sometimes when you get into something like this, and you know, my hope is that we get a third party facilitator for that one. It would probably be better if there is someone who's local, because they might need to actually meet in person. But as for the social planning, my thoughts are, because it's already areas A, B, C, D, and E, we could have one of the municipal directors for the social planning service as the board appointee. Those are just my initial thoughts. I know that's quite a bit different than what I believe Director Brander has put forward, but this is the first I've heard from Director Brander on this issue. So we got two slightly different things, but there is a bit of overlap.
And we are in discussion. This is a discussion. Question for this recommendation. Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. So I'm regarding my potential role as a facilitator. I'm willing to do that, and primarily it's because hiring an outside facilitator could start racking up costs pretty quick, and it may be needed for one or all of these. And you know, there seems to be a desire for, at least for Malaspina, by Director Gisborne, to have an outside rep. So I think, you know, if I was to be a facilitator, even to do the first meeting, the preliminary meeting, and then that is where the scope of the review would be pulled out. The reason I'm not interested in getting any financial remuneration is that my interest in doing this is actually primarily to save money for taxpayers and not to make the money instead of even at a lower rate than an outside consultant. But I think given the timelines, you know, if we want to meet on the early February, getting a third party outside facilitator would be hard to do by that time. In terms of my availability, the 12th works for me. I think those times are fine. If it's hard for meeting earlier in the morning, I don't see why there can't be flexibility to move those. I think 2 hours allocated seems reasonable. You know, they could also start in the afternoon, 12, 2, and 4 or something like that. But I do have two questions. One is related to participation on the boards. And I'll ask both of them, and maybe the corporate officer can help me learn. One is, can a participant also represent the board? And a participant of the service, can that be a joint? Can they jointly represent as a participant, or as a board, do they need to be different? And then a related question, can a participant also be a facilitator? Because if I was to be facilitator for social planning service and a participant, is that possible? So those are the kinds of just procedural questions.
Good question. Corporate officer.
Thank you through the chair. Yes.
Okay.
So that's all doable.
Yep.
That answers your questions?
That does answer my question. Was my understanding, but I just wasn't, 100% sure. And so hearing it from our corporate officer helps me.
And thank you for your willingness to do that. Here, biggest one.
I would just respond that, just because you can doesn't mean you should, because there is that kind of challenge of the perception of, when you're participating, are you the board representative or are you the electoral area representative? So I think that would be a challenge for example, when we get to the MVFD, Director Brander is the chair, but to represent the board and electoral area C at the same time might create a bit of friction in some certain things, because sometimes it comes up as like, well, is this an advocacy for the board as a whole, or is this an advocacy for the electoral area as a participant in the service? So that's why my initial thoughts are the board appointed representative, if we can help it, should not be one of the people that is automatically included as a participant, just to kind of make sure that you're not wearing the two hats at the same time. And if Director Fall wants to be the initial facilitator for the first meeting, I think it's fine, but for the sub-regional recreation service and the social planning service, I don't even think a facilitator is necessary. I think what really needs to happen is we need to sit down and have these conversations about what we're doing with this service. I don't want to get into it because we don't have a motion on the floor yet, so.
Thanks, Director.
So I think the service reviews for the fire department, you clearly understand who's involved. The service review for the social planning shouldn't be too. The service review for the recreation includes just areas, but all of the things we're going to be talking about and need to figure out includes the city. But the service doesn't include the city. So I don't see how a service review that doesn't include the city is going to solve anything. And so I think we should pull those ones out and have better definition around a process for that particular service review prior to just barging ahead. But I see there's some timelines, and I'm not sure exactly how we go about it, but we need a clearer outline of process and how we address negotiations between the city and the regional district around that item.
Thank you. Through the chair. The parties to a service review are outlined in 355 of the legislation. And they indicate that it is the initiating participant in the service, any other participants in the service, and the board. So in this case, the city would not be a participant, but that does not mean that the participants in the service area can't determine that they might want to engage with external agencies. But
that happens after you initiate and get your stuff sorted out.
so in this area, we are talking about administration and operation of the services. And that really is a determination of the service participants. And they'll determine how they want these service reviews to look and the methods to go around it. There is a lot of legislative process that you guys, that even at that first meeting is required. It's not, there's a lot of agreement that has to come to within those participants. That first meeting has a whole bunch of things that are required to do in pretty prescriptive manner.
Okay, I have next speaker, Director Southcott, then Director.
Thank you. I really appreciated the report attached, 146 pages, I think. And up until about 1:30 this morning reading. Welcome. Really informative. I just wanted to mention one thing, and I appreciate your details, corporate officer, because that's really spoken to quite well in that report in a variety of attached documents. It's interesting to kind of get a sense of history and how from the provincial, the documents come from the province, basically. Anyway, on December 17th in the committee of the whole, the city committee of the whole, there was a council resolution to that this agenda item 7.1, which has been referred until after this one agenda item we're discussing right now, is half of the resolution. The other half was directly related to the sub-regional recreation, well, the financing of the recreation complex. And so it's in staff's hands right now. It will come back, that will come back as a report to council. And I only mention this because it's gonna have a big influence on, there won't be much that will be able to be achieved anyway in the first meeting, I don't expect, unless city staff's report comes back to city council in the first week of February, and I'm not holding my breath about that. Anyway, I just mentioned this because we can still have that first organizational meeting, but what comes back to city council will probably have quite an influence on subsequent discussions that have to do with this particular, the sub-regional recreation service review. And that is just kind of floating out there right now as I see it, but I thought it would be important to mention that because I'm sure it's going to have a substantive effect or influence on what conversation will carry on in that service review.
Thank you, Director Southcott. That's all good stuff to think about. Director Brandon.
I didn't see any other hands up, so I think I'll go forward with some of the motions that I have here and see what happens, but. So the first one I'd like to propose is that the committee recommends to the board that the board appoint Andrew Fall as the facilitator, Director Fall, for the statutory service reviews of the Malaspina Fire Protection Local Service Establishment Bylaw number 255/1994, the Sub-Regional Recreation Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw number 530/2018, and the Social Planning Service Establishment Bylaw number 533/2018.
Seconder for that motion. I will second it. Yeah, discussion.
I just want to say that, whether some individuals feel that a facilitator is not really necessary for the sub-regional recreation or the social planning, I think it can't hurt, and I think it can help move meetings along. And at this point, I certainly want to keep any budget for a facilitator at 0, and if we can do that at least through the preliminary meeting, that would be fantastic. I'm not speaking for any time after the preliminary meetings, but this is what we're looking at today, so.
Yeah, so the motion on the floor is for the Andrew Fall to be the facilitator for the preliminary.
I would move to amend it to specify for the preliminary. And then Andrew can make recommendations for any of those that he feels should have maybe a third party or something. Like, I think you're trying to get through the initial process. And then it's possible, where you're in those conversations that you might just find out that a different facilitator might be better for the rest of the process, or no facilitator, or whatever. So I think the amendment I'm trying to say is to appoint Andrew Fall for the facility for the initial statutory meetings, or whatever the word is, for the initial part. Preliminary, yeah. Or initially appoint Andrew Fall, meaning that it's not necessarily going to carry through to the end.
And it does say,
And I think that might address,
it doesn't say the preliminary meetings in the motion.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, Corporate Officer.
Thank you. So there is a requirement to have this meeting, the first meeting. Then once that's done, I believe there's another 60 days. And decisions about appointing facilitators would have to come through the board. So just if we have one that says only for the preliminary, then you'll have to come back and say, and now we would like to extend to the second meeting. We need a different facilitator.
We said, or that the board initially appoint. Doesn't specify that it's only for any particular meetings, but gives the idea that it might change. I
So the
think
question is whether
think
that
that
word initially.
Director Gisborne was concerned in being that he he would be locked in and doesn't want to be, and so I'm just trying to address that concern.
All right. Where'd you get one?
Thank you. I know this is a relatively new process for our regional district. We have a lot of statutory service reviews, so it's a bit of a learning experience for everyone around the table. But it makes me think about, art, horse, road, which one comes first. After we have our preliminary meeting about, what we're going to do, I think that's when we determine, do we need a facilitator or not? We might have our first meeting around the social planning service review and we get all in the same room and we look over the history and we find out that, hey, we're all on the same page. In which case we go, we don't need a facilitator of anything. We can essentially be done in maybe 10 minutes and off we go. If we do need a facilitator, then we can come back to the board, and I think it could be fine to appoint Director Fall for the social planning and the sub-regional recreation service. But I don't think we need to appoint a facilitator at this time for those preliminary meetings for our service reviews. And then, like I said, when we get to the MVFD service review, there will most likely need to be a facilitator, but I think that will come out of the discussion of that preliminary meeting. And I think what we're doing right now is we're putting the cart before the road, because that first meeting is where we come out with that roadmap of like, hey, there's a fork in the road, which way are we going to go? And we get into that first meeting and, some directors might go, well, we should go left, some should go right, and some say we should just get out of here. And I think at this time, I don't think this motion is necessary until we actually have that preliminary meeting and actually address like, hey, what are the concerns that we have? I've expressed my concerns through the documentation I provided to the minister. But at this time, I think it's a little premature of us. And that's why when you take a look at the staff report and the motions that's been brought before us, it is who is the board's representative and what date. That's what the staff have put before us. They haven't come to us and said, you need to appoint a facilitator. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here. Once we have that preliminary meeting, come back to the board and say, hey, this is the other resources we need. Maybe we need to spend a whole bunch of money on this, or maybe like, hey, we got it sorted out. Looking forward to how we deal with it.
George Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I would just make the argument that I think everybody here probably recognizes that a meeting moves along more efficiently if there is a good chair or facilitator involved. And as Director Fall has so kindly offered to provide that service to us free of charge, see no problem with taking advantage of it. I also don't have a problem with putting wording in the motion to say that it is specifically for the preliminary meetings, that a decision for future meetings could be made at another time. But I think that there would be value in including Andrew in the 3 preliminary meetings.
Let's hold that thought. Director Gitlin.
Curious. So when these committee meetings are formed, is the facilitator the chair, or does the committee members themselves determine who the chair is? Question to our corporate officer.
Thank you through the chair. These are not committee meetings. And therefore, facilitator would be the better terminology. To lead the meetings, I would guess. And a facilitator is not required. But,
So in the absence of a facilitator, could it then just fall onto the board representative to be the one that is essentially chairing the meeting? That's not a meeting.
Is there no intention to?
Thank you for the chair. Again, there's no requirement to have a chair, and it is up to the service participants, the representatives in the service review to determine how the meetings. What you guys are doing here right now, as well as what you do at the meeting, what you decide at the meeting, what you bring back, and what you did at the table.
Dr. Lennox?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, page 8 of 145, I mean, we have all the history there, but page 8 really clearly spells it out in their guide. And I think it's helped me. I don't have a problem with the, facilitator. I think having that overall say thank you and the avoidance of any cost is obviously all of our objective, but really clarify the issues, determine the scope, identify each participant's interest, and agree to the process. And it's really pretty open. Excuse me, so I think that's when you determine, do we need the facilitator? Do we need anybody, the city, anything else? And then the next paragraph is very, true, right? We're going to negotiate openly, fairly, honestly, right? To get the issues exposed and towards a solution. So we have latitude when we meet, what are we doing? And then we decide. So I'm good with Andrew or Director Fall being involved because, he's a smart guy.
Thank you. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I think Director Lennox hit the nail on the head there. I think regardless of whether there's an amendment to this motion or not, I'm okay either way. Trust me, I'm not trying to get more work. I'm not seeking to involve myself unnecessarily in these processes. I think I have enough on my plate, but I do want to help if I'm able to. And I'm happy if it's either way. If it stays as it is, I would enter that process as a facilitator, even at that first meeting, and focusing, on that last point of the process. So in my view, those meetings would start, and that group of people would decide how that meeting proceeds, if there's a chair or if there's not a chair, and who that chair is. And the facilitator would have a role of trying to get to that point. If the motion passed as it is, that would mean if one of those processes wanted to change the facilitator role or not have me as facilitator, well, then that would come back to the board to make that change. And if they were wanting me to continue as facilitator, then it wouldn't have to come back to the board. Conversely, if it added words along the lines of as the facilitator for the preliminary meeting, that kind of amendment, then that would put the onus on each of those three to decide explicitly in that first meeting whether there is a need for a facilitator or desire, and who that would be and how that would move it forward, and then it would come back to the board. So either way, I think fine. I think it's up to what the participants in these service reviews really want. I don't think it really matters one way or the other. If it passed with that amendment or not, we would get to that meeting. We would talk about those 4 points that Director Lennox mentioned, and then that group would agree on how to move forward with it. And if there's any recommendations or changes for facilitation, then that would come out of that first meeting.
Thank you, Director Fall. So I'll draw everyone's attention to the recommendation that is on the floor. No amendments have been made to this recommendation, so this is what we are considering. And I'll ask if there are any further speakers to this recommendation. I'll recognize you in a sec. I guess I'm going to put myself on the speakers list. I haven't spoken on this. And I really like the idea of having a facilitator, because I think it takes the pressure off the participating directors and also the board representative, who may not be all that familiar. I don't know much about the recreation, sub-recreation service. So yeah, I'd be a great board representative, but would I be a good chair when I don't know really anything much about it? So I think having a facilitator there who is kind of a neutral, even though he's a member of the board, I think that would be very helpful. So I'm speaking in favor of the motion on the table. And I have now said my bit. So final discussion on the motion on the table. Director Gisborne.
First, I got a question. So the way the staff reports are laid out is each service review is separate, because there's going to be some cost allocations. So when it comes to the board and we vote on the social planning service review, my understanding is that would be the participants voting on it. So by having a motion where we've essentially taken all three of them and are lumping them together, it makes me think about what the ministry had talked about. Like, well, we could choose to kind of do all the service reviews together, but then that means all the participants are then paying for like the joint service review. So I'm just wondering, would it actually be better to split this motion into 3 parts? Or are we setting a precedent here? Because this is the first board motion, or sorry, committee motion, which will go to the board. motion related to the service review, and now we're establishing the precedent that we're just gonna vote on them kind of like as a block, and I think that's kind of weird. And just to Director McCormick's point, I think you're actually one of the most qualified people about related to the recreation service review, because a lot of this occurred back in 2016, 2017, and I don't think any of us were here at that point other than yourself, so.
Thank you. Maybe you will.
Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Thanks for your-
so thank you for your comment, Director Gisborne. If there's nothing further on the motion on the table, I'm going to call for the question. All in favor of the recommendation? 1, 2, 3,
Oh, I'm just-
and, any opposed?
I'm good.
None opposed. Okay, so that carries unanimously.
It's a question related to what we just passed. Was there anything particularly wrong with a single motion?
Technically, no, you may see me divide them at the first level.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to go to the first motion in the package and input Director Southcott in the blank space there.
Okay, now just when we approved the agenda, I believe we changed the
Yeah.
order.
Oh,
Yeah, I want to keep track.
So it's 5 and 6.
I'll second Director Southcott for the social planning board representative.
Okay,
Yeah, that's 0.5 now.
okay, so do you want to vote on Director Southcott on recommendation number 5? Are you good to do that? So you moved it and it's been seconded? Okay, so any discussion?
Yes. So because this is about appointing a board representative, I'm actually really grateful that Director Southcott is, not running out of the room. Because I think it is really important that because there are participants from all the electoral areas, that having, someone who is not an electoral area rep to represent the board is really important. And I look forward to, Director Southcott working with this committee through this process. Just to give us a little bit of history as to why this was triggered, the social planning service was created back in 2019 as a result of a lot of collaborative work around the C3 meetings with the city, the Tla'amin Nation, and all the electoral area reps. I actually was the one that signed on to Area B participating in this service. I felt uncomfortable at the time, but what was explained to me was this was a collaborative service that was being created. It had Tla'amin that was funding the staff position at the city. The city was creating the staff position to look after regional social planning. So I went along because I didn't want to be the one stick in the mud. But
Motion on the table, please.
yeah, and I would want the board to be aware that the service has significantly changed since then. We're no longer funding that position at the city. We've cut back essentially all the grants and aid that was going through social planning. And, you know, there's, what is it, $1,500 for taxation for that service now. And I'm just asking myself, is there even any more need to keep this service? And I won't read out the lengthy service establishment bylaw that essentially says, you know, we can use that service for anything and everything that we want to under the sun, and there's no requisition limit on it. That makes me very uncomfortable because I know right now our board has been really wonderful.
Director Gisborne, I'm going to ask you to focus on the motion on the table, which is to appoint Director Southcott as the board's representative. So speaking to that motion, please. We're not talking about the merits of social planning. We're talking about the appointment of Director
I'm
Southcott.
happy to have Director Southcott, and I'd be also happy to just withdraw from the service entirely.
So we are speaking to this motion. Director Elliott.
I think it's a really good choice. Director Southcott has been an elected official since the creation of this particular service, was probably quite aware of how the history behind it with all of the parties involved, and has good information to bring to the table, as well as, you know, being an excellent choice for the board itself.
Thank you. And I totally agree. So if there's no further discussion, we will vote on our recommendation, what was formerly recommendation 5. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
I think we're on 6 now.
Okay, Director Brander.
I would like to propose we put February 12th in there, and I just want to clarify, I'm not setting a particular time of day, doesn't really matter so much. It's just about getting it on that date, because that's there are very few choices.
We're in, just for clarity, 0.6, so the old 0.6.
Point six.
Thank you,
Point
thank
six.
you.
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been moved and seconded for February the 12th. Discussion on this item. Director Fall.
Just briefly, the February 12th works quite well for me. I usually try to block out Wednesdays for RD. After that, the Thursdays are just, a boondoggle, and later on in February starts to really get crazy for me. So if it's not the 12th, then for me it would be most feasible in March sometime. So all this to say, I support the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further hands, we vote on the 12th.
Very brief. I totally support the 12th. Though when we do get to the other service reviews, I'm a little hesitant to having all of our service review meetings on the same day, because these might be getting into a lot of detail. They might be a little stressful around the table. And if we have all three on the same day, by the time we get to the third one, I'm a little concerned that maybe our overall conduct might diminish. And we have until, I believe, April the 5th to call that first meeting. So I'm happy with the 12th for the social planning, and we'll get to the other ones later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands on this recommendation, we will vote all in favor. Any opposed? Carried unanimous.
Does this movement specify which one it's for?
Social planning.
Does it say that?
Well, the motions kind of go together. So the social planning ones are the 5 and 6.
Oh, I see.
I know what I'm saying, I'm just,
I know it doesn't specifically say that.
just wondering if it should.
I think with participants there, we could make an amendment for the next two, but it's clearly.
It's clear because of that, okay.
We can choose.
Number 1 under 8.4, and again, I'd like to put Director Southcott.
Point of order.
And yeah, the second item, as we revised our agenda, was item 3 and 4.
3, it went 5, 6, then 3, 4, then 1, 2.
That's correct. That
So we adopted these.
under the amendments to the
I
agenda.
was asking.
Case then, Director McCormick, I apologize.
I'll second.
Okay, well, I feel like I've been voluntold, so that's okay. That's fine.
Thank you, Director McCormick.
We'll vote all in favor. Any opposed? Carried. Recommendation for Director Brander.
Again, February 12th. And part of the reason for choosing that date is not just because it's the only time available, but because we need to get through this to get any potential budgets into the 2025 budget.
Okay, that makes sense. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I realize that Director Gisborne has some concerns about those meetings becoming long and people getting tired. I think there's two reasons for these meetings. One would be to meet the legislative requirements. So I think having the meetings and getting the ball rolling meets that, takes that specific time point off the pressure. But I think the length of the meetings can be quite focused. I mean, the goal was outlined in the previous discussion, scope, problems, and the process to resolve. So I think the meetings, I don't see why they would have to be that long. If you start really getting into it at those preliminary meetings, I think that's actually not the purpose of those first meetings. It's really to say, to get into it, you're laying out the process to get into it. So it's really the scaffolding of the review, what's the scope, what's in, what's out, who's doing what, facilitator or not, and then starting to lay out a schedule for that. So I do think it's possible. And I think the rationale for having them all on the same day is that there may be linkages. Has been talked about before. They can be done separately. They can be joined. The facilitator may be the same or different. They can be done at the same time. So I think those linkages could be addressed by having them on one day, and then they could roll out after that along their own paths together or separate.
Thank you, Director Fall. We're voting on the former recommendation number 4, February the 12th. Further discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, Director Brander.
Third time's the charm here.
You'll get to number 1 eventually.
Exactly. Board Director Southcott as rep. MVFD.
And Director Southcott agrees. Seconded by, I'll second it. So any discussion, Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I think Director Southcott have a great voice at the table, especially with his experience with the paramedics. And it was more along the lines to, I guess, keep it efficient, allow Director Lennox to move himself from one of the meetings, instead of attending 3, it's 2. And brings Director Southcott up from 1 to 2 meetings. He'll be involved anyways, so it seemed like a no-brainer.
Thank you for the discussion. Richard Goodwin.
No, thank you. No slight to Director Southcott, because I'm very happy to have him for the social planning service. My initial thought was to have Director Lennox, because electoral area fire departments are a bit more challenging and unique than, say, municipal fire departments. Director Southcott has lots of experience. I know it's kind of like, oh, which one's better? I think they're both amazing. I don't actually know the details all around. But I was thinking, because of the unique challenge that the MVFD faces, because it's a small electoral area volunteer fire department, I was going to nominate Director Lennox. So I'm just kind of wondering, would Director Lennox be willing to accept if I put forward an amendment to the motion? Would Director Southcott be offended?
We have a motion on the table that would substantially change the motion, so it wouldn't be.
Person, yeah.
You'd have to
turn down one motion.
This down and then.
Well, my apologies. There was no discussion on this motion before. It was just thrown at us, which is how we're supposed to be doing things after Al Sebring talked to us, but getting motions real quick and hot right now, so that's how I'm responding.
So the motion before us is number 1 that's on that list. Director Southcott's name is in the blank. So discussion on that motion, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Maybe I can just, so we don't kind of get into the weeds on this. I totally respect Director Southcott and his experience. What I would say, appreciate you trying to think of me and my schedule. This particular subject is near and dear to me. I've been a member of that department. And I do think I could be, constructive and bring something to the committee. So it's important enough that I'm not gonna, I would fit it into my schedule. So I'm just gonna put it out there. You're busy, I'm busy. But in this case, I know the material, so I'm offering to accept if the board is fine with that. So just so we don't get into a vote or whatever, Yeah.
We have a motion on the table, so Director Southcott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't say I'm ambivalent because I feel as committed and as, passionate about this subject as you do. Thank you, Lennox. And, but yeah, membership in that department probably relates to slightly more penetrating insight to some of the internal dynamics over the years than even I would have. I did have a long-term relationship with chiefs and the deputy chiefs down there, and their crews, to the degree that we did training together, and also operationally through the chiefs meetings that we had quarterly. But that's, I definitely defer to, this is likely to be a pretty delicate one. So if it does fit within your schedule, I support you taking that position rather than me, even though I think both of us have quite a lot to
Value there.
Director Elliott.
Thank you. So I'm gonna put forward an opinion that might be different than what's going on around here. We've been trying to put folks representing the board that maybe don't have a stake in the game. And so the fact that you've been a member of that fire department and it is so near and dear to your heart says to me that you do have a stake in the game and may not be the ideal representative as far as trying to put a less involved person in that position for our board. Hence we have Sandy representing the rec service because we all got a stake in that game, but she doesn't. So I'm actually in favor of Director Southcott because he's very familiar with emergency services and has relationships with the fire department. as did I when I was a first responder, but is not right in the mix with them. So the understanding will be there without the investment. And so, I'm in favor of the motion on the table.
You, Director Gibbon?
Thank you.
To have interest.
Andrew
Well,
had his
this
hand up.
this is great.
Okay, Director Fall.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we'll get back to you. Director Fall.
That's okay. It's fine. So I think both directors would do a good job, and I'd have a hard time voting against either of them to try to, so I whatever's one in front of me, I'm probably going to vote for. I think both of them would do a really excellent job of that. So the question I have actually is through the chair for the corporate officer. Can the board have more than one representative? And B, is it possible for the process to change the representative if that seems to make sense, especially after the preliminary meeting?
Thank you through the chair. So the board can appoint one representative. And it is to represent the interests of the board. And then if that representative needs to change, the board would make another appointment. But we can't appoint two representatives to act alternates. There is not a provision for alternate.
Gisborne, then Director Southcott. We need to wrap this up.
Okay. Does our next meeting start at 4 or at 3?
At 4,
Okay, good.
but we are not finished. There are other items on the agenda.
Director Elliott brings up something very important. Who has like a horse in this race? This has now brought something back to the front of my mind, which was sitting in the back in a little cave. The Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department has a service operating agreement actually with the city of Powell River. So if something happens in Area B and it's kind of close to the boundary, there is an agreement there for firefighting services from the municipality to come out into Area B. So that actually makes it more in the favor of Director Lennox, because I didn't even think Director Southcott would ever, conflate the two and go like, oh, well, this might help with the city or something like that. But one of the big challenges with the MVFD and why there's a service review is this issue around perception. The perception of things that are going on in the public, the perception of what's going on internally, that most of which I'm not aware of. So I think that there is kind of like equal horse in the game on a number of sides. Like, Director Lennox has history with the hall, but Director Southcott does represent a municipality that actually has an agreement in place with the MVFD. So it's kind of like a participant, but not really. Yeah, complicated. I'm sure throughout this process, I'm going to be picking Director Southcott's ear all the time, whether he likes it or not. My apologies. But I do think, because whatever comes out of this delicate service review for the MVFD will most likely affect other volunteer fire departments, and Area A has 2, Savory and Northside. So that's kind of why I was leaning a bit more to Director Lennox. And of course, I'll still be bugging Director Southcott related to the social planning service review, as he will be the board rep.
Try to move on. Director Southcott, you were next.
I'm going to reserve any comments I had and just withdraw my availability for that. Can I do that? I'll just say neither of us are active members of the department right now. So I don't see any conflict either way, but I'm not looking for more work, and I definitely I'm personally, I would vote for Director.
Can we withdraw by unanimous consent?
Sure. Okay, so you wish to withdraw your name then?
Right way.
Corporate officer.
So, the assembly can withdraw the motion together. Yes.
I consent.
Okay, is everybody consenting to withdraw the motion on the table? Seeing everyone in agreement. All right, so that motion is withdrawn. So there will be another motion which I'm waiting to hear.
I move, which I guess is now number 5. The committee recommends the board appoint Director Lennox as the board representative to the formal statutory service review of the MV Malaspina Fire Protection Local Service Establishment bylaw. Blah, blah, blah.
Seconded by Director Elliott. Discussion. I think we kind of had our discussion already. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Hey, Director Brandon.
In February 12th.
Second.
Director Gisborne. And we've already had a lot of discussion about this, so maybe we can go right to the recommendation, and that is all in favor. Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
Move number 7.
We are now on number 7.
Seconded.
Okay, so that has been moved and seconded, number 7, that we uplift the motions to this afternoon board meeting. So all in favor of that?
We didn't motion.
Yep.
Director Lennox. So let's go to items.
And in my case, our side's
No, I know you're busy. You want
Oh, you're full anywhere in Canada.
So on the.
Okay. Director Elliott,
Sorry, carry on then.
we'll get back to committee of the whole. And we are now on item, the former, whatever it was. 7.1 or whatever it was.
7.1. It's
So-
about the rec center money.
That is on our agenda as item 7.1. So there is a recommendation before us regarding our response to the mayor's letter. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Director Brander? I'll second. Discussion. Director Brander.
Given the current situation we're facing with the service review, it seems like a fairly reasonable way to proceed with everything finalized.
Okay, thank you. I recognize Director Fall, then Gisborne, then Emily.
Sorry, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Director Gisborne?
Oh, sorry. I would actually request that this motion be split. The first paragraph from the second two paragraphs. Because the first paragraph is, decline the recreation funding request, as this matter will not be resolved until the sub-regional recreation contribution service establishment bylaw, blah, 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 blah. But then there's an and then the next part says that in good faith, the funding participants, electoral A, B, and C will contribute. And I just find that kind of contradictory, so. That's why I'm asking that it be split. The first one is a response and the other one is like a budgetary.
Okay, request to split the motion has been made. I have no problem with that.
I'm just trying to determine if they can stand
Can
on
they
their
be
own.
split?
So I think the first one is declining the amount that's requested.
Mhm.
And the second one is providing a contribution base on similar amounts in the past.
Well, it just has an amount there.
Yeah.
So the two don't actually then have to go together.
So the funding participants look forward to negotiating an agreement to invite.
That should go with the first part.
That would actually make sense to go with the first part.
I'm just having a hard time seeing them separate, like that in good faith, the funding participants, electoral area A, B, and C will contribute 238,244 this year. That doesn't stand on its own, without an amendment. So it might be better to either deal with this motion, withdraw it and propose it how you would like to have it.
So you're recommending then that either we approve it as it is written with the 3 paragraphs together, or withdraw the motion or defeat the motion and then bring forward another motion. Is that what you're recommending? That we don't split it? I'll go with whatever you say.
I just wasn't prepared for this and I'm just trying to determine how it was actionable. So the bottom ones be actionable, so. I'm not able to see them.
I think
separate.
if the first section is defeated, that might it renders null and void the second section.
No, 'cause it's about a different thing. So anyway, the corporate officer has ruled that we don't separate the item. So we will deal with the recommendation on the director before and the director sets spot.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I asked for it to be separate, but that's okay. Is that we did just have some discussion on the service review process. The service review, the first step is going to be that, funding participants get together and decide, hey, what's going on? So the last part of this motion that says that the funding participants look forward to negotiating a new agreement to invite the city of Powell River to appoint their negotiating team. Once again, cart before the horse. Perhaps the service review committee is going to say, we don't want to be part of it, or maybe we're going to come up with another plan. I'd like to remind everyone that the Sub-Regional Recreation Contribution Service was created in 2019 as a result of the 2018 referendum, which was a result of collaborative discussions between the electoral area directors and municipal reps with the Regional Recreation Initiative, which was started in 2015. So this goes way back. We ended up having this referendum, which came to the amount of $177,000, which was the contribution to the municipality for their sub-regional recreation service. We established a 5-year contribution agreement that was signed in January of 2019, and that agreement expired in 2023. In 2023, I put forward a motion to ask, that the board speak to the city council and have a meeting. That board never passed through our board. So our board failed to update the agreement. The city failed to update the agreement, and then the agreement expired. The document itself of the agreement that we used to have said that if you want to renew the agreement past December 2023, we need to have both parties agree to it 6 months prior to its expiration. That would have been June of 2023. Well, I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm pretty sure it's 2025 now. We've now got this letter of request for funding from the mayor asking for funding. And I'll go back to what I said last year. We don't have an agreement. We don't have any of that, anything like that. It expired. We could hand over the money, but the municipality could turn around and close the complex. Like what assurance do the residents of the rural areas that are paying for this have to actually get the funding? Last year, when we went to adopt the budget, it was proposed that the contribution amount be increased to $313,000. That represented a 77% increase over the original $177,000. There was no agreement in place. There was no delegation. There was no formal request for an increase to our board, such as this one, which I'm very thankful that the mayor sent this letter, but it's kind of a year too late. At the February 28th board meeting last year, I strongly advocated to adjust the value down to $234,500 based on that formula. But the understanding was that the decision to actually hand over the money would still be coming, because when that amount was set, it was a weighted vote amongst the entire board. So I was thankfully able to get all directors but one to vote in favor of at least getting that requisition amount down. But we never actually had a discussion with the city to say, oh, we'll give you more money. We'll give you $230,000, $233,000. Now this is another proposal to have it go up again. And without an agreement, it makes me kind of go like, hey, how are we giving out money without an agreement, without a contract, without board direction? And I would be comfortable with saying, okay, so for 2024, let's just go with the same funding that we had in the old agreement, $177,000. That should have been what 2024 was. Even without the agreement, I'm feeling generous. And then this year, I think the number will be based on what we come up with through our service review and through collaborative discussions. But if we go with another $177,000 this year, because we apparently overpaid them last year, that would mean this year would be $121,000. So to have it go up again, $238,000, when the referendum was $177,000, and we don't have an agreement, we don't have a contract. Like, this to me is just absolutely wild, that we have no agreement. We're handing out cash that is 30% higher than the original agreement after the agreement has expired. And it just makes, when folks go, hey, why are my taxes going up so much? And it's like, well, this is what we do. We don't have the agreement. We just hand out 30% more than what the old agreement was, and the agreement's expired. So I'm actually opposed to this motion because, like, how is this going to be voted on when it comes to the board? And on top of that, I get that the correspondence is for the committee of the whole, but this is a budget issue. I would actually move to refer this to the finance committee next week. I'll wait till everyone else speaks before I make that motion. Sorry.
Not making any motion, all right? So the motion on the sheet. Sorry.
I support the motion. I second paragraph. Good faith, something to me. And this is genuinely good faith with this number and the text or what it says. I believe that city councillors are very likely to feel the same way. Give some certainty to the budgeting going on here and at the city council table. And my suspicion is that the service review concerning this topic may very well morph itself into what the third paragraph states. I'm kind of hoping it goes that way. Because I think there really is something to talk about. So I support I support the first paragraph because this is just what led to this letter. Was only half of the resolution. So as I mentioned before, there is a pretty significant ball in the air that I consider to be significant in the for council right now. That's my reasoning for supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Elliott was next, then Director Lennox.
So I have a question first. I think it is to our finance department. And the question is, in the old agreement, which I understand has been expired, sets out the intent of sharing expenses. It indicates that the annual funding contribution will be determined by multiplying 32.52% of the recreation amenity space, the area of the swimming pool, all that kind of stuff, by 25.22% of the net recreation complex budget. Is the number that is proposed in this motion, did you arrive at that by using that formula or was it at some other? Green?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. We arrived at that number by multiplying, using the same contribution formula that is in the expired contract by multiplying the, but we use the 2024 net recreation budget. We don't have the 2025 net recreation budget. So we multiplied the net 2024 net recreation budget by 32.52%. And then we multiplied it by 25.75%, which is the population of area A, B, and C combined based on the 2021 census of population.
So I just wanted to make the point that it's been, there's been increases on operational expenses across the board for everybody. There's union negotiations, wages go up every year. So I just wanted to be sure we were actually basing it on the operational costs that we were trying to contribute to. And worried that the number might have been based on something from last year and yet there's increases this year, right? And so if we find that we do get the budget and the number would be something different, is there room for amending this to the actual intended amounts?
Green?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. The only way that we could amend this if it goes upwards to another amount would be to have a contingency included in the sub-regional recreation budget. Without a contingency, there would be nowhere to draw the funds from because we don't have a non-statutory reserve for that service. So the board could, yeah.
And I don't know where the budget's gonna land either, but I just know that there's a lot of increases going on across the board. So I don't know what the request that Mayor Wasnow's was asking for, the maximum available under the agreement, how that differs from the number that we're putting forward. Do we know that?
Ms. Green?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I think that Mayor Wasnow was looking for the maximum contribution available under the service establishment bylaw, which would have, which the product would have been, based on the 2025 completed roll values, that would have been $334,080. And then, but we have to subtract the 1,500 administration fee from that, which would bring it to 332,579.
Okay, so that would be different than the formula used within the agreement.
That's correct, would be.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Director Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. A few points of, my understanding, and if I'm corrected, that's fine, but whatever may pass here would then go to the board, and that's a weighted vote. So that's a consideration for directors as we talk about these things. And then, to be quite honest, the weighted vote that the municipal directors have. So I just want to bring that out because I have to remind myself. So now's the time to get it right is kind of what my thoughts are. I do have some problems with what's before us. Obviously, the first part is, I think we're in mostly agreement that we have a service review coming up and that we would decline this particular request. I have a question for staff. Is this $238,244 included in the draft financial plan as it stands?
Ms. Brennan?
Thank you, Chair. No, what is included in, what was included in draft 2 and then what is proposed in draft 3 is slightly less than that. It's 233,000 as a contribution. So this would be, $244 over what's in the draft.
Thanks. Maybe I could just follow up. Looking at the items that are in the old contract, and I understand the calculations in that, it's really, in my mind, what the service review committee is literally going to be working on. So the questions we have about what's the right number, what's the, that's what it comes from. So I don't, again, to the expression used earlier, the cart before the horse. So, and really, I'm not confident in the number that's in this motion. There's unknowns from the city, so some good points about, like, I'd like to understand that before I can, we consider the rest of things. And, Area A wants to pay its fair share, but we need to understand what that is. I do think the finance committee, obviously, there's some relevance there. So I just like to, I'm not in support of this particular. Thank you.
Okay, Director Branders and Director Gisborne, and then I'll put myself on the list. Okay.
Well, thanks, Chair. I'm just gonna say I'm understanding what the finance department has done, how they've calculated the 238,000, that it was based on the original equations in the agreement. I'm comfortable going forward with it. This initiative was heavily supported by the voters in the referendum, and I think they would want us to do it. And actually, we need to do something prior to the budgets being established. We can't wait until the service review is completed before we allow them to let them know how much we're going to give them.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne.
Oh, I think I spoke. I don't see if you've spoken yet.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, I have to apologize to the assembly. I should have done the service review last year because when our agreement expired, I was watching the municipal council meetings, which I understand the municipal directors that are here, they're not here representing the council, they're representing municipal taxpayers. So my comments are more so directed at the municipal council. I watched those meetings. The amounts that were being asked in 2023 of November, I was in attendance. I'd even asked the mayor to appear as a delegation, and he didn't even tell the rest of his assembly that I'd made that request. The reason I had made the request is it was my intention to explain why those numbers are the way they are in the service agreement, because the discussion between the municipal council and their staff was the electoral areas are not paying their fair share, they're not contributing, and it was very rude and very disrespectful, honestly. And there was no opportunity on our side to actually clarify the misinformation that the municipal council was spreading around amongst themselves, because it was really easy for them to just go, well, our tax problems are the rural areas aren't giving us enough money. And then we get a request saying, give us the maximum. Now here we are a year later, and it's another request of give us the maximum, when they can't even do the math equation that's in the agreement that expired over a year ago. And I find it incredibly disrespectful for the municipal council to keep asking for the maximum without even talking to us and understanding what is in the document that they have at their table to actually go, hey, we're not required to give that money. That was a result of the regional recreation initiative. And I'll even read that motion. We're all going to work together. We're going to work with the city. We're going to work with Tom. And then the last part was that the discussion initially focused on the recreation context with a broader context to follow. When was the last time we had a conversation about this? This is one of the reasons why I've initiated the service review, so that we can actually sit down and actually understand each other, because I don't want us to be at odds with the municipality. But if the municipal council and the mayor will just send us a letter saying we want the maximum without actually saying, let's sit down and understand why that formula came up the way it is. What about the broader context? You know, there's a whole lot of other recreation issues within the municipality that need to be talked about. And I don't know whether it's political apathy, but I think if we go forward, even with giving this increase, which is posed on our agenda, it's way above what the original agreement was, which was $177,000. I'm not comfortable with this. I think it's rewarding bad behavior. And really, we need to talk to each other and understand how we're feeling, because I got residents that felt that a lot of those comments that are showing up in the paper around the comments that city council is having is quite rude and disrespectful to the electoral areas. And to the director from Texada, I hear the comments of, well, why doesn't Texada pay either? And it's like, they don't understand the documents that we formed almost 10 years ago. So sorry, getting a little hot under the collar, but that's why we're doing the service review. And I hope that once we get through that preliminary meeting, we can actually invite the city councilors to come over and talk to us and really kind of get to the bottom of these issues, because this is a fight that's kind of been going on in this community for my whole life. Here I am.
We don't know about your whole life. Anyway, really.
Thank you,
Chair,
Chair.
and I will go back on the speaker.
Thank you, Chair. So my first time speaking, I didn't speak to the motion. I was just clarifying some information. I think we can all agree that the rec center, and it isn't operational expenses of our entire recreational department, it's just the rec center. So I think we can all agree that everybody values the rec center and the services that it provides. I'm in favor of continuing to provide the amount we had agreed to as far as the calculation goes, that we agreed to in the expired agreement, until such time as we can make a new one. For a lot of reasons that didn't happen when it should have, and we can't go back and change that. But I do think it's in the best interests of the entire community that we maintain what it is we said we were gonna do until we can figure out the new agreement going forward. So that formula, this number is based on the formula from a budget number from a year ago. And I understand why. And so it's good to pass the fact that we're intending to give money. I think a separate resolution could be made to ask for contingencies in case that number is different based on real numbers. So I'm in favor of maintaining the expired agreement and what we agreed to provide. The formula we're talking about worked out to that 170 whatever number in the first year of the agreement. It was never intended to stay there. That's why the provision of the formula is there. So I agree, we should be sticking to that formula. There are cost aspects of the rec center that are quite high that are not included in the operational expenses. And so people get different information if you include all of the expenses of the rec center versus operational expenses. And so that's where the difference is. It's not necessarily misinformation, but rather people going, well, that's not fair. But my thinking is the entire rec center should belong to the qathet Regional District. And then the formulas between areas would be naturally there, and you would be paying for real costs broadly and shared equally among, based on the way areas share. And the reason we're in this position is because the city owns an asset that really ought to be regional. And that's why we end up with this friction. If you want to remove the friction, set it up so that it's naturally owned by the people who are using it everywhere. That's my thought on that. I'm in favor of this motion, but I'm also in favor of maintaining whatever contingency we need to implement the agreement as intended. The old agreement expired or not. So that's what I'd like to see happen.
Thank you. Putting myself on the speaker's list. I'm trying to find a way out of this. And it comes back to, I believe, Richard's initial request to split the motion. Corporate officer, you've given us your best advice that in splitting the motion, that compromises the second part. But what I'm going to propose is that we carry on and support the first paragraph and refer the other two to the Finance Committee to be decided upon as part of the budget deliberations. Because really that's where it needs to be, not here. And so corporate officer, if directors decide to go that route, we have the okay to do that. I understand. We can make that decision to do that.
I would second that.
I wonder if it would be better to just take that middle one and refer that, because the intention of what I'm hearing around the table is to renegotiate the agreement. So it might be good to refer that motion to staff to present properly on the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Only because the way it's worded now is not wrong.
The entire motion?
No, the
No,
middle part.
The
That-
middle part. So this committee could then choose to move the middle part with the dollar amount to the Finance Committee. First and hold on, consider the first and third.
Isn't that the same as splitting the
Ms.
motion?
Jones?
I might suggest striking out the middle. And
I'm
then,
striking up the middle.
and then,
Okay, so the amendment has been proposed to strike out the middle paragraph, moved and seconded. Discussion on doing that. Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? One opposed? Director Subcom. All right, so back to the main motion as amended, which is the first and third paragraph. Gentlemen?
nope, I was jumping ahead.
Okay, all right. I think we have discussed this at great length, so if unless someone has something new to say, let's have our vote. All in favor of the recommendation. Any opposed? One opposed. Thank you.
And I'll move to refer the middle piece to the second clause to Finance Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Director Fall. Discussion on moving that to finance. Go ahead.
It was an excellent suggestion. I really thank the chair for thinking of it. I do think we need to work on that a little bit, and having it just a number is being a little bit difficult for all of us. And we needed to figure out it gives us the opportunity to discuss how we meet the intent of the existing agreement, even though it's expired.
Yeah,
And
and there's been,
fine that we would really like to renegotiate. So I'm good with that.
recommendation. Okay, I am as well, because we've had all kinds of numbers from 177,230, 238 to 333. You know, we're really throwing these numbers around, and I think that's really the Finance Committee to deal with that. So I definitely support the recommendation. Anyone else? All in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? Carried unanimous.
Okay.
Okay, that gets us to new business. So, and I would remind directors that in 25 minutes, we have board meeting scheduled, and we do have a new session. So, Director Gisborne, the floor is yours.
I'll move the motion that's on the agenda, and then seconder, I'll speak to it briefly.
seconded, yeah.
I included the whereas clauses because I think that helps give the assembly and everyone a bit of the background information, you know, to have these meetings with Ministry of Transportation. We had another motion earlier on our agenda regarding the road conditions up in Savory. Ministry of Transportation and Transit is responsible for the subdivisions in the rural areas, for the drainage. And I really felt that we got a lot of productive and fruitful discussions from those meetings, and they kind of fell apart. And therefore, I've put forward this motion, and it kind of makes me think a bit about how the hospital district has been working with VCH by, you know, having like a terms of reference where it's like, hey, if Ministry of Transportation is apprehensive about meeting with us for whatever reason, maybe we can have that put in the terms of reference so that way we all kind of know why we're there and what we're participating on. Part of my mind was like, you know, maybe we could even have this go as a motion to the AVICC because some regional districts are starting to get little meetings like this, but of course they can come and go at the ministry's pleasure. And there's only, what, 27 regional districts in the province. And I think each regional district should have something like this because like how much of our time in electoral area directors is spent dealing with freaking roads?
Something that the regional district doesn't do.
Which we don't do, but we get so much time taken up by it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I totally support this effort. As you can tell from our previous discussions, Ministry of Transit, I should say. You know, it's important for them to hear from us. And my understanding through some of those community groups I mentioned earlier, their correspondence with Minister Fleming when he was in the seat was that contractually, the contractors and the ministry are required to have periodic meetings with stakeholders. And I mean, how much more clear could you be? So I think that, I don't think we need to add anything to this, but I just think the requirement is there. And when, as you said, politically and otherwise, we need to remind them of such, because that's how the approach that the other organizations have had to refer to. Like you said, you were going to come and talk to us. Well, it's contractual.
Thank you. And I have a comment, actually a question for the mover of the recommendation. In numbered paragraph 2, it says that we express our desire to meet with representatives. It doesn't say plural. It doesn't say ongoing. It says meet. So I would
Regularly.
take that as referring to one meeting.
Mm.
I wouldn't necessarily take that to mean ongoing meetings. Yet your whereases all referred to ongoing meetings. So.
Good catch. Good catch. I think we should include, so where it says it's desired to meet with representatives, maybe it should say it's desired to meet regularly or periodically with representatives. I think that's a very good point. It's not just one meeting. I think we should be getting back to having those periodic meetings, whether they're biannually or quarterly but not just once, because.
Meet regularly.
I would suggest regularly because periodically it has discretion about whether you do it at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so your amendment has been moved.
1 second. Why don't we ask if everybody at the table is okay with that change?
Unanimous.
Why don't we? Is everyone okay? Yes? All right.
Yeah.
So then we will take that as including the word regular.
Good catch.
Further discussion on the option. Seeing no hands. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I was so slow. I'm in favor of the motion, and I remember we made some other motion about meeting Modi, and I'm wondering if this is in addition to, whether it conflicts with or is consistent with our previous motion.
Corporate officer.
Thank you through the chair. I don't recall the last motion. I'm just trying to pull it up right now. But
I don't even remember what meeting. I just know we've done this before.
I know that the ministry has changed, so the motion would not be out of order, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you. I just wondered if we had to withdraw in order to do this.
I recall it being talked about at UBCM, but there wasn't a formal motion in relation to that. That was
Okay, thank you. That was just my question.
That's what I was
It's definitely raised there on the concern about, how valued the local meetings were. So it's always good to reinforce that. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. And that brings us to question period. Does anyone have questions for the committee?
Thank you, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here. With regard to item 7.1, the recreation service contributions, after the agreement expired, I'm wondering if money has been paid to the city for the recreation complex, or is that money being held in reserve?
Let's refer that question to Ms. Greenan. And there she is.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yes, a contribution of $233,000 was paid to the city of Pueblo River for the recreation service in 2024.
Okay, so thank you very much for the response through the chair. So we're talking about 2025 now then, is that correct?
Yes.
I thank you very much for that. Thanks for the opportunity to pose the question, Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galinsky. Directors, we have an in-camera session. Would someone like to read the motion?
My pleasure. I move that the committee move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the committee considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district. K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages and that in the view of the committee could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public, and end the consideration of whether a committee meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded by Director Lennox. Discussion, all in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.